Call the special meeting to order for Monday, March 16th, 2026. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda of the special council meeting of Monday, March 16th, 2026? Councillor Popoff, Councillor Ray. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving right into bylaws here. We have the focus of today's special council meeting comes from Engineering Development Services as they walk us through development cost charges and a potential update to the DCC bylaw. We have Curtis and Mike here to walk us through this. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thanks for coming out this beautiful Monday morning on a spring break.
Yes.
Time. So a lot of work's been going on in the background in regards to DCCs, especially in regards to public engagement. So we've the last few months. So we've got the results back. We have Urban Systems on virtually here to do a presentation for us to go through the results and look at the next steps. So we're hoping, pardon me, to get 3 more resolutions from council that'll give us direction on how to move forward with the bylaws, so we can finish drafting it. I've drafted these draft resolutions and presented them based on the public engagement. However, council, there are alternatives if council wishes to go differently. I would like to mention, in case Joel doesn't, when he gets speaking here, is that in terms of engagement for DCC, this is one of the best turnouts that I know the city's ever seen, but talking to Joel too, is in the province and all the DCC bylaws they've ever worked on. So I'd like to give a lot of credit out to communication staff, Urban Systems for the work that's been put in on this, and even council for bringing it up at certain times. It's great to see, because usually we just hold a public house or open house, we get just a handful of people, but to have hundreds of responses back, that's incredible, really. So if Joel's ready, we'll let
Yes.
Systems take over.
Yeah, can I share my screen? I'll try. I've got the presentation. Let's see here. See if that works. Okay, can you see my screen with a slide on it?
Yes, we can.
You can. Okay, great. Okay, thanks. So good morning, everybody. And I'm Joel Short with Urban Systems. I've been working with the team at the city on the development cost charge bylaw. And so I'm going to do a presentation here on basically the DCC update, what we heard, and some of the options moving forward. So in terms of just kind of an overall agenda, I'm going to talk about the engagement opportunities. I'm going to talk about what we heard at 3 different kind of venues, the pop-up booth, the survey, and the developer meeting. Then I'm going to provide a bit of a refresher on the proposed DCC rates and comparisons. And then we're going to talk about assist factors, where we need some direction from council, and DCC waivers, where we need some direction from council, and then talk about the next steps. So in terms of engagement opportunities, we communicated through a number of different ways. We had a DCC project webpage. There were social media posts that the city sent out, which was great in terms of directing people towards the survey. There was a news release. We did household mailouts. The city mailed out a random sample of 1,000 households received a letter to participate in the survey, so that encouraged participation in the survey. And there was also an email to developers and builders for the meeting that we held. And then we held a pop-up booth at the Cranbrook Winter Market, which was that winter market is attended by thousands of people. There was so many people there; it was great. So we were there from like noon to 6 p.m. We had 76 visitors come by and engage in discussion at the booth. We also handed out 146 survey cards because, in addition to sitting at the booth, we were also out circulating with the crowd, and we had these postcards that we handed out that could direct people to the survey. So that brought some more people to the survey as well. And it was also great to be able to talk to people one-on-one there. In terms of the survey, as Curtis mentioned, it was open from the end of November to the end of January, and we had 534 total responses received, 198 from the random household mailout and 336 responses from other channels. And yeah, as Curtis mentioned, that is the biggest response that we've ever seen for a DCC survey. Usually we get maybe 100, so to have 534, that's great, and also really good to get a good cross section of thoughts and opinions on a wide range of matters. So yeah, it was great to see that kind of response there. Then we also held a developer meeting. They had we sent out emails to a wide range of known developers and builders in the community and invited them to attend a virtual meeting. So we held that meeting on January 22nd, and we talked about a project overview, proposed DCCs, some detailed discussions, some questions and answers. There was a total of 14 developers attending that meeting. Then in terms of the pop-up booth, just as a kind of a bit of an overview, we had conversations with community members there, and generally they talked about, we mentioned the potential, the idea for possibly having, a slight increase in taxes in order to lower DCCs. Overall, when we talked to people about that, we also had some display panels that provided background information. Overall, they can express concerns about the current level of taxes and rates, and they were also apprehensive about any further increases to allow DCCs to be lowered. Okay, the survey results. So I'm going to hit some of the top line items on the survey. You have a detailed report information that you can, and happy to answer any questions as well. But just there's a fair bit here, so I'm just going to hit the kind of the tops of the waves here. But basically, who we heard from, 98% were taxpayers in the city of Cranbrook, so not surprising. Your connection to Cranbrook, almost all live in Cranbrook, 97%, and either work or own land in Cranbrook. Who should pay for DCCs? So when we ask, who do you think should pay for the infrastructure needed because of growth? 82% said growth should pay for growth. The costs to service growth should be entirely covered by new development. Now, we had other choices where you could equally share. 17% thought an equal share would be fine. There was some other ideas that people presented. Those are set out in the report. And only 2% said that existing taxpayers should pay for all of the costs, and new development should not have to pay a charge to cover the costs. In terms of proposed increases to the DCCs, 47% said they seem too high, which is not surprising because it's quite a jump. But it was interesting to see that 35% thought that they seemed about right, and even 6% thought that they seemed too low. So those were interesting results. In terms of reducing the costs to builders and developers, we asked whether people would be willing to pay higher property taxes to reduce the DCCs paid by builders and developers, which might also lower the costs to final buyers. So we see that 70% said definitely not, and 16% said probably not. So you add those two together, and you've got 86% being fairly negative on the negative side about paying higher property taxes. Then we also asked basically the same question, but about water frontage taxes and sewer frontage taxes, and pretty much exactly the same answer. When you add definitely not and probably not together, you get about 85% that were negative about that idea. And just a small percentage, 10%, that said they'd be willing to pay a small percentage increase, like 1% above regular inflation, to help pay for reducing the DCCs. And then we also asked about, specific amounts, hold on a second here. I skipped one slide here. We also asked whether you think the city should reallocate funds, because instead of increasing taxes, you could actually shift money from other programs such as policing and fire protection and recreation and others. And once again, a similar type of response. We got 83% not wanting to reallocate funds from existing programs to reduce DCCs. And then we wanted to get their thoughts on specific dollar values of taxes. So we turned that into, okay, how much would this actually mean in terms of dollars to the average taxpayers? So we asked them how much you'd be willing to pay in combined property, water, and sewer taxes, because we thought, maybe people's thoughts might change when they know the actual amounts. And I guess not surprisingly, 80% said $0. They didn't want to pay any more in taxes. But there were some that were willing to pay $50 or more per year annually for the next 20 years, $100 more per year. And some were willing to pay $120 in year one and $50 in year two in order to phase in. But that was only 6% of the responses. And only 2% were willing to pay $175 more, which is the amount you would need to set that they'd have to pay extra in order to keep DCCs from going up at all. That just allows them to stay the same with no increase. We also asked about waiving DCCs for not-for-profit or affordable rental housing, and we had some results there that 35 was, so we broke it into three different types. There's not-for-profit rental housing, not-for-profit rental supportive living housing, and then for-profit affordable rental housing. And you can see that for the not-for-profit categories, it's pretty much exactly the same for both of them, where we've got 35% strongly disagreeing and 21% disagreeing, for a total of about 56% on the negative side for not-for-profit forms of housing. And then when we shift to the for-profit affordable rental housing, the percentage disagreeing gets even higher, where we got 53% strongly disagreeing and 25% disagreeing, for a total of 78% on the negative side. So even when it comes to waiving DCCs, it's not quite as negative as just the pure reduction in assist factors and reduction in DCCs through assist factors, but it is still on the negative side. We also, once again, wanted to get their thoughts on specific dollar values. So we asked them how much more they would be willing to pay to waive DCCs, and 67% chose $0, don't want to pay any more to waive these forms of housing. And then we did have some smaller percentages were willing to pay $18 for a one-time to waive half the DCCs, or $35 one time to waive all the DCCs for a type of development, or $18 every year, or $35 every year. But once again, you can see those are smaller percentages. The majority did not want to pay anything. They only wanted to pay $0. And then we had some additional comments. There's a long section at the back of the report where we allowed people to have any additional thoughts on development cost charges and who should pay for growth. And they fell into some specific categories. The biggest category was developers should pay for growth-related costs. About 137 of those comments fall into that category. Another bundle of notes were about growth-related tax increases would not be fair for current residents, so they just didn't think that was fair for current residents. Others just mentioned property taxes in Cranbrook are already high, and the city should focus on efficient service delivery for current residents was another category, and focus on managing its current budget to fund growth was another group of people, and others thought prioritizing maintenance on current infrastructure was important, and prioritizing seniors and residents on fixed income. So those are some some of the additional comments that we read through, and once again, all of those comments are set out in the report if you wish to read them all. And then we also just did a kind of a check. So we were able to separate out the survey responses between those who got the random survey letter and those who just kind of went on the website on their own. And so we could distinguish between the two. And overall, the results between the two different groups were fairly well aligned. They were both quite similar. The respondents from the random household group were slightly more likely to have a kind of a growth, pay for growth type of mindset. But in general, the alignment was fairly strong. Then in terms of the developer meeting discussion, we heard, had some good discussion and heard some feedback. They kind of formed into a few categories. One was about development activity and housing supply. They talked about how it's important to proceed carefully with DCC increases, that aggressive increases could significantly slow or stop development activity in the community. That multifamily housing is critical to community need, and significant DCC increases, they might impact project feasibility, maybe turning into higher rents or stalled developments. And uniform increases might disproportionately affect multifamily. So consider how the DCCs impact different property types. They also talked about things like cost certainty, waiving, and financing. So they talked about if it wasn't really clear about who's eligible for DCC waivers or reductions, and they have significant upfront design and planning costs, that might discourage some projects from proceeding. Uncertainty around offsite costs not covered by DCCs can be a challenge, because sometimes there's offsite costs that are associated with a specific development that you have to determine. So, they talked about the interplay between those two things. And then they also emphasized the financial burden of carrying costs when suppose they pay for some infrastructure up front and then the work is reimbursed later. There's interim financing and interest expenses. Those can be significant. So they want to make sure that we keep that in mind. There was also a bit of a discussion about the perceived overlap between DCCs and the required offsite infrastructure improvements. There was some implication that, maybe they're being double charged for this, but we clarified at the meeting that, double dipping or double charging, that can't happen under the legislation and best practices, and it doesn't happen. So if somebody builds something that's a DCC project, they get a DCC credit for it. Or if they're required to build something that oftentimes that isn't included in the DCC project list, so that's above and beyond what DCCs are. And then we had some questions regarding what DCCs cover versus what developers are still required to build. And so we had a discussion about that, and specifically about water, sewer, roads, and frontage improvements and service connections, and what's a DCC type of project and what's a frontage improvement or a service connection. Yeah, so that's the survey results. I don't know if there's any questions right now, or I can just keep on rolling through the rest of the presentation, and maybe we can have a discussion on all items at the end. I'm happy to do either. Would you like me to just keep on going, or are there specific questions about the survey?
Looks like we're good to go here. Yeah, nobody's got any questions at this time.
Okay, great. Okay, so now I'm just going to give you a bit of a refresher on the proposed rates. You've probably seen these a couple of times, but it's been a few months. Just the capital projects, council reviewed the capital project list in detail. I think that was kind of the end of September, early October. And roads, water, sewer, storm drainage, parks, all of those projects. And after review, council resolved to keep all the projects on the list. So there was a council resolution passed to that effect. Just as a reminder, the capital cost estimates, these are the DCC projects. These are just the DCC projects. I mean, there's other projects that the city is doing that are outside the scope of DCCs, or that are required just to rectify existing deficiencies. These are the projects that are either required 100% due to growth or partially due to growth. So you can see we've got about $172 million Total costs over 20 years. This is a 20-year time frame, and a little less than half, 84.7 million paid by new development and 87.6 million paid from other city sources. And that's because there are some projects, you might have a project that is maybe 50% required due to growth, but also 50% required due to rectifying existing deficiencies. So you get some projects are split between being paid by development and paid by the broader city. And then in terms of the potential DCC rates, you can see, like, for a residential subdivision, we've got roads DCCs, stormwater DCCs, water DCCs, sewer DCCs, and parks DCCs. Adds up to about 25,300. And then there's all these other categories: small scale infill and townhouses. Small scale infill are things like duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. Anyways, you add all those up, that's around $20,000 for the DCC, and then apartments about 14,000, and then we've got commercial, industrial, and institutional that pay based on a per square meter of gross floor area. And then when we compare the existing and the potential DCC rates, we've got existing DCCs of about 11,500 for a residential subdivision, and then the potential DCCs of about 25,300. So that's a change of about 13,700 and an increase of 119%, so about 120. Same for the other residential categories. The commercial and industrial didn't go up as much, or the institutional, because we made some changes in the equivalency factors, which is, we kind of modernized how you translate certain square meters of gross floor area into equivalent units. So that resulted in a more modest change for those uses. And then secondary suites, we also discussed that, and currently suites pay a DCC at building permit. They're exempt if the value is less than $50,000. So then the exemption value is proposed to increase to $120,000. Council discussed that and provided direction to move that to $120,000. So most suites should have a construction value of less than $120,000 and won't pay a DCC. If it is over $120,000, then it'll pay the DCC equivalent of an apartment. But just to emphasize that most suites, when they're built, should have a construction value of less than $120,000 and won't have to pay a DCC. Oh yeah, and then some quick community comparisons. We had kind of a range of community comparisons here, and there's, I think I've mentioned this before, comparing DCCs, it's a difficult thing. Every community is different, has their own challenges, have their own infrastructure needs. So comparing DCCs can be a challenge because it's often apples and oranges. But people like to see comparative numbers, so we have some comparisons. So when you compare with some kind of medium-sized interior communities, you can see Cranbrook proposed at the 25,300-ish range. It's kind of in the mid-range of this range of communities that we have here. We also compared to resort communities, and you can see Cranbrook is maybe a little on the higher end of the scale, but still there are places like Revelstoke and Osoyoos and Golden that are proposed that are higher. And then if you look at larger growing communities, places like Kelowna or Surrey, you can see that Cranbrook is definitely on the low side. And one thing people sometimes say is, well, you can't really compare Cranbrook to, say, Surrey. But one of the things that you can talk about is that the costs to build things probably aren't any cheaper in Cranbrook than they are in Kelowna or Surrey. They might even be more expensive in some cases. So there isn't really like a solid reason why the DCCs in Cranbrook couldn't also be, strongly influenced by high construction costs like all of these other communities. So that's just a bit of comparison. So now into the assist factor, which is where we're going to need some thinking and some direction as set out in the agenda package. So just as a reminder, DCCs are used to assist in paying for the cost of off-site infrastructure, and it's a percentage assistance provided by the city. The minimum is 1%. It's required by the Act that you provide some level of assistance, but the most common, normal amount of assistance is 1%, which is the minimum. But there are opportunities to provide a higher assist factor, and of course, the assistance is paid by the taxpayers. So if a water project gets a 50% assist, then it's the community, it's the taxpayers that are paying the 50% of the water costs created by new development. So in other words, taxpayers are providing a 50% subsidy to developers for the water project required by the development. You can vary the assist by service, so the roads assist can be different from the water assist, but you can't vary it by area of the community. You can't say like downtown gets a higher assist than other areas, or commercial gets a higher assist than residential. And the municipal assist factor, it's completely at council's discretion. It is not a technical item at all. It is a political policy decision, and you can just choose. You can pick whatever number you want. And as you increase the assist factor, so here's a table with going from 5%, 15, 35 to 52%. The 52% is how much assist you need to keep the DCCs exactly as they are, or pretty close to where they are. So you can see as you increase the assist factor, looking at, say, a residential subdivision, the DCCs go down. So at 5%, you're paying about $24,000. At a 50% assist, it goes down to $21,000 or so. At a 35% assist, it goes down to about $16,000 or so. And at a 52% assist, it goes down to about $11,600. And same with all the other categories. For each category, the higher the assist, the lower the DCC. So that means that if you provide a higher assist, you can reduce the DCC, or you can also phase things in over time, for example. Now, of course, providing that assist has an impact on taxes. So we calculated the impact on property taxes. So it is divided into a few different categories, because property taxes would pay for like roads, drainage, and parks DCC assist, and then water, of course, would pay for the water assist, and sewer would pay for the sewer assist. And you can see the percentages here. So as you increase the assist factor, the property tax has to increase. Like, for example, at 35% assist, you've got a 1.94% increase in property taxes. At 52%, you got a 2.89% increase in property taxes. Then the water frontage taxes, they're much more significantly impacted, because you've got sort of a smaller source of revenue that you have to generate more money from. And same with sewer. And so then we translate those into actual dollar values for a sample residential property of 503,000 assessed value, 15.25 meters frontage. That's the same one that's used for your when you send out your information on taxes, at least last year. So that's the same kind of average sample residential property. So you can turn that into actual dollars, like how much does this sample property pay. So it's about $16 at a 5% assist, $50 at a 15%, $117 at 35%, and $174 at a 52% assist. And that would be like a one-time increase, but it would be like every year they'd have to pay that extra amount to provide that assist. So over the 20-year period of the DCCs. So there's some options. The last
we've got a question from council here.
Oh, sure.
Councilor Peabody, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, how are assist factors affected if there's not enough DCCs in the fund to cover the portion of the project?
I can take that, Joel.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Peabody, through the mayor. A big part of the idea with DCCs is if the growth doesn't occur, likely the project doesn't need to occur. In some cases, if we're doing, say, the UV plant, we don't have enough DCCs and we have to move forward with the project anyways, one option could be to borrow the money or fund it from elsewhere and then collect DCCs and pay back into it. It wouldn't affect the assist factor though. That's just how to recoup the DCC portion. So if we don't have enough DCC funds in the reserve, it's likely we don't have enough growth to trigger the project, but it doesn't impact the assist factor.
Thank you. So just to clarify then, the assist factor it's in the bylaw to determine the maximum amount that DCCs can contribute to a project, as opposed to what actually may happen in the future. Does that make sense?
Councillor Peabody through the mayor. So looking at the DCC project, I'm going to go back to the start a little bit. I think, so there's a project identified. There's a percentage that gets put in our capital program based on the existing population. So it's the benefit allocation that's determined by engineering principles, like how much water's needed to be treated or the amount of traffic on an existing road. The assist factor is purely a political decision on how much council wants to aid development and bring down the DCC rates. So there's the 1% minimum that's required in legislation, but it doesn't impact when the project needs to go forward or anything like that. It's just how much does council want to aid development and bringing the rates down.
Okay.
So it's above and beyond what the existing population would need to pay for their percentage of the project. It's purely to aid development.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. Back on page 37, when you were talking about secondary suites, exemption value proposed to increase to 120,000. So if a secondary suite's value is 140,000, are they paying DCCs just on the net difference of 20, or is it the whole 140?
Councillor Popoff to there.
Oh.
Sorry, Joel. They're not paying DCCs based on that difference. All it does is trigger the need for the DCC payment. So if they could bring their costs in under the 120, they don't have to pay. But as soon as they go over, even by $1, then they have to pay. That's just the hard line in the.
So it's not the net; it's the total. If they exceed 120, they're paying on the whole 121,000.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And that's currently, or is that proposed? It says proposed here.
It's proposed. Council's given the resolution for the 120,000. Our current bylaw is based on legislation, which is 50,000. So in today's world of our current bylaw, anybody who comes over 50,000 is paying on a suite. We're looking at the new bylaw to give a higher cap on that, so
Right.
less suites need to
I
pay.
understand.
So
the
to
cap,
incentivize the suites.
I understand the cap, but maybe a discussion at some point about the net, not the total. That's still proposed, right?
Well, it is still proposed. Council could change the number, or we could up the limit if council wanted, but I don't know if we can. I don't believe we can change based on the net versus the entire gross, I guess you could call it. It's just, we need to have a number in the bylaw. As soon as you hit that value, you have to pay or not.
Thank you.
So it's just what council wants to see is that number. Because we can go up to 150,000 or leave it at 120. It's up to council.
Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Mayor. So Curtis, just to clarify, as the report mentions, so at our September 29th council meeting, we passed a resolution that council was directing staff to increase the building permit DCC exemption value to 120,000. So we've passed that resolution indicating we want that to be part of the new bylaw, correct?
That's correct, Councillor Ray.
Okay.
Councillor Graham?
Yeah, thank you. So just a question about the assist factor and how so if we agree with the assist factor of DCC, so that we would start taxing, like how does that, what triggers paying that assist factor? Like if development totally collapses, are we still taxing at that rate to gather money for DCC projects that would probably never happen?
Councillor Graham, through the mayor, there's two ways that council, we could look at doing that, and it's really a finance question, is that we could either look at taxing and putting it into a reserve fund and drawing from it when we need to, and that would get rid of those large humps for when the big projects come up. The other option would be is that we could, when the projects are put in the bylaw, we could increase taxes for that year, but it could be a 10-15% tax increase to cover that one project or something fairly large, but then it would decrease. But I think for a stable tax rate and for predictability for the residents and taxpayers, it's probably better that we put it into a reserve. And then if we find growth is slowing down or we're not spending it, we could always look at decreasing that. But that would be a finance question and see how growth continues as time goes on.
Thank you. Any questions? Nope. Okay, we're good to go.
Okay.
Yeah, carry on.
So yeah, there's the option to phase in over, that was a similar approach that was taken in the last DCC update, over kind of a 3-year period. A relatively even 3-year transition for this update would be 35% assist in year 1 and 15% a year assist in year 2, and then year 3 it would level out at the 1%. Now, bear in mind there's also in-stream protection, so any applications that are received before the bylaw is adopted, they pay the old rates as long as they get their project, the building permit issued or the subdivision approved within 12 months of the new bylaw being adopted. So there's this kind of like 12-month built-in in-stream protection time, which is set out in legislation. So there already is a bit of a phase-in of sorts. And just as a reminder, when we asked people in the survey how much more they'd be willing to pay in order to lower the DCCs, that's basically how much they'd be willing to pay in terms of providing the assist amount. 80% chose $0, and there were some people, but small percentages that wanted to pay $50 or $100 or $120 or $175. So just as a reminder on that. And so we're asking for council's direction, whether council wants to provide an assist factor above 1%, or if you want to phase in the new rates using the assist factors. I know there's some some proposed resolutions, and so maybe we leave it to that resolution discussion, unless you wanted to ask any specific questions at this point, although we did get a few questions already on the assist factors. So I could either pause now, or we could move forward and have that discussion when the resolutions are being discussed.
I've got a couple of resolutions here. Maybe we can hold that until we go through the resolutions. Yeah. No, fine?
Yeah.
Or Councilor Stensky? Okay. Yeah, we got a resolution dealing with the 1% and then the dealing with the rate. And then any waivers. Oh. Yeah. We're good to go.
Okay, good to go. All right. So then DCC waivers and reductions. So it's possible for the city to provide waivers and reductions for some types of developments that are set out in the legislation, not-for-profit affordable housing, including supportive living housing, for-profit rental housing, development designed to reduce environmental impact, and subdivision of small lots designated to result in low greenhouse gas emissions. They can be established in a separate bylaw. They don't have to be part of the DCC bylaw. Indeed, it's actually better that they're in a separate bylaw, then they don't have to go through the ministerial approval process, and then you can make amendments to it without that. But basically, if you choose to waive or reduce DCCs, you've got to fund that amount through non-DCC dollars. So there's some things that need to be thought about. We provided a paper that sets out some of the items that need to be discussed, but basically you got to determine the waiver amount. Are you going to waive it all 100% or 50% or some other proportion? And you can have different amounts for different types. Then you got to think about funding that waiver amount, setting that aside in your budget, maybe putting some money in a reserve fund. You could also possibly set limits in the bylaw. And to give an example of the tax impacts, if you had a 30-unit apartment building that was, say it was a not-for-profit rental building, and you waived 100% of the DCCs, that'd be about $420,000 waived, which turns into about a $34 total tax increase with property, water, and sewer on the average home for 1 year. So that's kind of like the extent of the potential tax impact. You can also set it up so that council makes a decision on each application, so that comes to council, or you can delegate that to staff and have staff implement the bylaw. As I mentioned before, it's good to have a separate bylaw for DCC waivers. You can also have like a sunset clause. For example, you could say, oh, we're going to do this for 5 years, and then we can reevaluate that at some point in the future. Once again, circling back to the survey, when we asked people how much they were willing to pay to provide waivers for not-for-profit or affordable rental housing, 67% chose $0, although there were some that thought, okay, it'd be okay to pay maybe $18 in taxes or $35 more in taxes. And you can see the order of magnitude of that cost is very similar to the example that we presented. So there are some that are willing to pay a bit more to provide for waivers for not-for-profit or affordable rental housing, but the majority, 67%, wanted to pay $0. And so in terms of direction, we've got some basic questions as to whether council wants a bylaw to provide DCC waivers. And of course, you don't need to adopt this bylaw at this time. It can be adopted later. And then there's some questions whether you focus on not-for-profit rental or there are, other forms. And then how much do you want to budget each year? Are you going to delegate that to staff? Is there a sunset clause? And I think there is some proposed resolutions for discussion. So that pretty much brings me to the end of the presentation. We will have some next steps after this will be to prepare once we've received direction from council, is to prepare the background report and the bylaw, and then proceed with the adoption process. If you decide to proceed, then that's readings by council, referral to the ministry and the inspector municipalities, then approval, and then fourth reading and adoption by council. So yeah, that's it for my presentation, and maybe I'll turn it back over to Curtis and the team to direct things through the council report and the resolutions.
Yeah, go ahead, Curtis.
Okay. No,
Okay. Councillor Stutzky?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, we've gone through a record year in building permits and similar or better prediction for the upcoming year. So can you just take us back quickly and summarize where things are at currently with the DCCs and the assist factor before we decide on the future? And how much you think that might have contributed to the development that we've seen?
Councillor Stutzky through the mayor. Pardon me. So our current DCC bylaw, I know Joel's talked about the rates and where they're at. Our current rate is at the 1% assist factor in the current bylaw. What was done previously is we did have a stepped in phase-in because we were going from $2,000 to just around $12,000 per lot. In this bylaw, same as the current one, we're looking at incentivizing higher density with those factors. So it's kind of disincentivizing the single family lots. They're a little bit of a higher rate than the multi-family rates. Just because from an asset management perspective and taxpayer perspective, they're not as, we don't get as much housing per acre of land essentially, because we can, for a 10-acre lot with a medium density development, we could almost do 300 units. But with a single family subdivision, we're only looking at maybe 20, 30 lots, depending on the lot size. And then taxpayers, getting back to the asset management standpoint, is the taxpayers for a single family lot aren't paying enough taxes to cover for the replacement of the roads and utilities in front of their house. When you look at their whole tax bill, so much is going to recs and public works and stuff like that. So we are looking at incentivizing the higher density, the apartments and whatnot. When we talk to developers, I know Joel didn't mention this in the report, is a lot of the ones that turned out to our engagement were local developers. We invited through the spectrum, everybody we've talked to in the last several years, and we also put it in the social media in case we forgot somebody. We didn't have a great turnout from the developers outside of Cranbrook, and talking to them and why they weren't interested is because when they look at our DCC rates for Cranbrook, they're very low compared to everywhere they're working out in the province and the country. We see a lot of, pardon me, when we talk single family lots, DCCs in, say, the Lower Mainland, Toronto, they're 50,000 to 200,000 per lot of the last articles we've come out. So it may seem like a large increase for our local developers, but compared to these large ones that are coming in building these big apartments, we're low. We're still very low. So I don't know if it would have impacted what we're seeing today or not. But they are factoring in what our current rates are. They're aware that we are looking at going up. So and I know Urban Systems has looked in the past, and I've talked to Joel about this, is that there's no really indication that increasing rate stalls development. In some cases it increases it because we see more applications come in and they just continue, or it really depends on the economy. When you look, going back to the presentation we've given council in the past, when we were looking at development application fees, is that our application fees, DCCs, is a very small portion of the wedge, especially at the levels we're talking in Cranbrook. The overall cost of the construction per square foot is a lot compared to so we're only a few small percentage, is single digits really, when you're talking cost to build square footage. If the developer's only looking at subdividing, creating lots, it is quite a bigger expense to have a $25,000 DCC when you're trying to sell your lot for $150,000, $200,000. But by the time you put your house on the lot, it's on those single family lots, the lowest ones we're seeing are $500,000 to easily over $1 million nowadays. So the percentages, it's when you look at the overall cost of building and passing that value on to the lot owner, the cost of construction is going up so much, unfortunately, too. So this is covering our cost of construction to provide these same projects and being able to allow development to occur. Like a good example is the Victoria Sewer Trunk. If we didn't have the DCCs we were bringing in now to do that project, taxpayers would have had to fund that, or we couldn't have been able to facilitate, say, the Green Home or these other developments in that area, the Rotary Seniors Housing Project we're looking at now, or the Creekside Townhomes. So the DCCs are a very important part there. Or it's just how to refund them. I see the council may have some questions here, but before we move on to the resolutions, I'm happy to take council's questions here now, but I do want to give Mike an opportunity to talk about his work he's been doing with the chamber and meeting with them regularly on that. I think that's worthwhile for council to hear. So I'm not sure if we want to do council the questions now, or do you want to leave this?
Oh, I think we'll field a couple more questions, then we'll go to Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you. I have like maybe one question, a couple of comments. The one, like, when we're like, as I read the report and then listen to the presentation and about the survey, like I feel like we didn't ask all the questions. We didn't ask a question that is, if we overtax developers with DCCs, it'll stop development and taxes will go up anyway. Like, if we don't get development, the taxes will still be borne by the majority of us in Cranbrook, so they'll go up. So I think that is something that, was leading something like, it just to me, that needed to be said. And then did we figure out like a sweet spot of where we have DCC costs versus no development versus what the tax revenues are that we've currently brought in? Like we raised DCCs about 5 years ago, give or take, and it was substantive. And that also we still have increased tax revenue with these buildings that are being built. That needs also to be factored in. And I understand the point on single family homes, and we don't like single family homes for some reason, but we need all types of housing, and people don't always want to live in an apartment or in a townhouse. So when we look at single family homes and we talk about, yeah, it could be $1 million build, but it might not be $1 million build. Majority of lots going in Cranbrook are selling for 120 to 150,000. With this increase, that's 20% of your lot cost on top of that. So now you're looking at a 20% increase just on your bare land costs as a developer or as somebody purchasing it. So we have to be cognizant of that. And my last point is with these new developers that are in Crown Pacific. I just texted Brett during the meeting. I'm like, would 120% increase per unit to DCCs, would that influence your position of building in Cranbrook? 100% it would. So we have to be aware of that. If we don't get these buildings, we don't get the tax base, but our costs still go up and we still need to build and repair our services. So I think we have to tread lightly. And again, no one's probably shocked at my comments.
Thank you. Further? Yeah, Councillor Bissett.
Thank you. There's a lot, just to Councillor Graham's comments, there's a lot of assumptions in that. And I think we have to go with the information. As was mentioned, when you say 120% increase to a developer, of course they're going to react to that. But when you see the actual amount, that's something else. Also, it's world events that determine what is going on as far as the cost of building and the cost of materials. And we're not in charge of that, as far as I know, in Cranbrook. And we've had a lot of development, even with our higher development cost charges. And we've had statements, you know, when this was properly surveyed with the public does not want to pay for other development. And DCCs are directly related to new development. So it's not about maintaining existing infrastructures, something we're all paying for. But correct me if I'm wrong, DCCs relate to new development. And so I don't think it's fair to say that we should have asked the public, well, do you want to pay for this anyways? Well, we're not going to unless there's new development. And they have said they want developers to pay, which seems reasonable. It's a small percentage of the cost of building. And I think we're going to see some shocks that happen in our world because of world events, and we'll live that. And we've got to maintain what is our influence on things here in Cranbrook. And I don't think development is going to be affected by this. I think it's going to be affected by what the price of steel is and what the price of wood is and all those construction materials and the price of transportation to get it here. So I think we got to, you know, back up the bus a little bit, go with what the experts have told us and the informed people, and make our decisions accordingly.
Thank you. Certainly, in my perspective, you look at the Victoria Avenue project, that was a DCC project. Just look at the return on investment, you know, from the time we've done that, you know, in a short period of time here. And we have probably 3 more multi-million-dollar projects coming up on the books that are going to make a difference. Those aren't going to happen without that upgrade. The only way it's going to happen is if the city borrowed. That's the only other option we'd have, or raise taxes. That it would be, let's be honest, we'd be rode out of town on a rail, you know, if we start raising taxes like that. So, you know, we'd be borrowing, and you know, every year we ask about Charlotte about her comfort rate or her comfort level on our borrowing, on our debt. And it can get out of control pretty darn fast. I look at the community, a couple of communities that didn't want to raise taxes or limiting DCCs, and, Golden. Essentially, from what I understand, Golden has a moratorium on building. Their infrastructure can't support any more building, and they've had a couple of big projects, that developers were willing to take into the community. It's a full stop from what I understand up there. Well, that's not helping the taxpayer very much. I also look at the Calgary situation. You've got that main water line. This is what this is all about. They've been feeding into that for years. Obviously, they weren't charging enough or didn't have adequate funding to deal with that, because they've had 2 breaks, and to the point I see last week where the province is stepping in now to see what's the deal with their water systems and their funding. So, I think as bad as this is, we need to keep moving forward. The problem was we sat with a DCC rate that was so low for about, 20 years, I think, So, yeah, you sit, it's sort of like the barber, that was doing $10 haircuts, right? And he didn't want to raise it, and all of a sudden, he wanted to raise it. And this is a true story in town here, and every other barber's charging 30. He says, I better kick it up. So he doubled this to 20, still the best deal in town. Everybody cried, right? So, and that's, Councillor Bissett's point on, the big increase. Is it a big increase compared to what other communities are paying? No, we've been so low for so long. And when we raised them the last time, 5 years ago, we raised them. We're still on the lower end. Just, right? So it'd be more acceptable on the lower end. And we knew at that time that probably half of the comparable communities we were looking at were in the process of amending theirs as well. So they were going to jump again. So certainly, I think it's, we do need the increase. How we want to approach it, that's, I think, we need to discuss here today. Thank you. So everybody's good. We'll move into a motion here. Can I get a motion that, subject to council's consideration of engagement feedback received on the proposed development cost charge bylaw rates, council directs staff to draft the proposed development cost charge bylaw with a 1% assist factor? Mover, please. Councillor Ray, Councillor Bissett. Now discussion. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. So you touched on this briefly, but just to maybe clarify a bit further, how common is it in BC for communities to go with the legislated minimum 1% assist factor?
Thank you, Councillor Ray, through the mayor. The 1% assist factor is the most common one adopted by most municipalities.
Do you have a percentage on that? It sounds like it's not quite 100%, but is it pretty close?
I don't have a number, Joel. Would you have something? You've worked on a lot of bylaws.
Yeah, we've worked on a lot of bylaws. I'd say there's probably, so there's a few communities that provide some additional assist to some specific DCCs. Like they might say provide a 15% assist on a roads DCC, for example, or a 20% assist on a water DCC. But virtually all of them have like 1% on a lot of the DCCs. And I would say that of the communities that we work with, I'd say probably like 85% have like 1% on everything. And then there's probably another 15% or so that have a percentage assist for one or two of the specific services. And it's very rare that you have a community that has kind of like a high assist factor for all of the DCCs. I know, for example, Prince George had a very high assist factor, 50%, 70%. For a long time, I haven't checked recently, but because they were trying to they were just trying to avoid any additional cost to try and encourage some development in Prince George. But I think, as has already been noted, it's usually larger economic forces that have an impact on whether development happens or not. And so there are some communities that have higher assists, but they are kind of rare. So, and once again, these percentages are just kind of my perception of the percentages. I haven't actually, looked at all the numbers and calculated the percentage, but most, I think, are, because when you think about the philosophy that growth should pay for growth, that new development causes these costs, and therefore new development should pay its fair share. And once again, remember that for each of these projects, we've already allocated the fair share to development. And for a lot of these projects, we're allocating part of the cost to existing development as well, to existing taxpayers, because the project might benefit or does provide some benefit based on sort of traffic volumes or water flows to the existing population. So we've already done that thinking, and so we're already allocating the fair share to growth, and then the assist factor is on top of that. That's an assistance beyond the fair share allocation. So when people think about that, they think, oh, you know what, development should just pay its fair share, and that is done through a 1% assist factor. So I don't know if that provides enough background information of a perception of who's charging 1%.
Okay. Yeah, I got Councillor Peabody, Councillor Graham, Councillor Popoff, Councillor Stetsky. So Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a two-part question, so just bear with me here. So sorry, Curtis, at our current DCC rates, do you have any recollection if that's been a deterrent for any development in Cranbrook? Has anyone looked at our DCC rates and assumed that they're too high and decided not to go ahead with the project?
Councillor Peabody through the mayor. Not that I've been told from a developer that I'm aware of. Usually we get the opposite, where people are looking at them and they say they're very low compared to everywhere else they're working. But I haven't had a developer come and say they're too high. They're not able to proceed.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess part two. If we go ahead with this increase with the 1% assist factor, if the sky does fall and development does slow down, how will staff be kind of, I guess, paying attention to this? And what tools do we have to adjust the DCC bylaw in the future if we find that it is detrimental to the amount of development that we're getting in Cranbrook?
So the best practice guidelines that we want to try and follow are that we do a deep review of our DCC bylaw like this every 5 years. However, we can do minor updates whenever they're needed to adjust rates, to add or remove projects if it's warranted. But the best practice is to look at our bylaw every 5 years like this and to see what's happening in the economy, and change the growth rate, change the projects depending on what's actually physically happening and happened the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think a 1% is great, because if we're going to assist, then we might as well lower our DCC rates, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of assist factor, but I did have one question around the assist factor and I know it was mentioned that you can assist just a specific service. Can you assist a specific project, or is it just like roads or sewer? You can't tie it to a project if you wanted to have an assist factor higher on a project. That was just my one question.
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, you have to provide the same assist for the whole category. So if it's roads, it's whatever, 15% for all roads. You can't just pick 15% for one project.
We're going to Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. Curtis, what is our current assist factor?
Councillor Popoff through the mayor, our current assist factor is 1%.
1%. Okay, so Here's my confusion, I guess. On page 44, assist factor resulting DCCs, there's the asterisk at the bottom. The 52% assist aims to keep the DCCs very close to the current rates. So we're talking 52% here. So am I missing something between 52 and the current 1%?
Councillor Popoff through the mayor. So that point is that if council wanted to keep the DCC rates the same and not increase them, the way to do that and keep the same projects is to adopt an assist factor of approximately 52%. Would leave us at the same rates, but allow us to implement the new bylaw based on what we're seeing for growth, infrastructure costs, and the projects required to keep that growth, to facilitate that growth.
So from what you're seeing then, we need to do away with the 52% and go all the way down to 1%. I'm still think I'm missing something here.
So the 52% isn't, we're not, well, if we didn't put a new bylaw forward, like we're looking at now, we kept the old bylaw, we wouldn't be bringing in enough money to facilitate the growth that's being undertaken. So in the end, we'd be short, the city would be shortchanged and that taxpayers would have to fund it. So like what was done for the 20 years prior and keeping that, the really low rate. But our current assist factor is 1%, but to keep the rates the same and proceed with a new bylaw, we'd have to have a 52% assist factor.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So somewhat related question. How long have we been at 1%? And I probably should know this, but what's the process been to get us, because it sounded like we were higher and then we've come down to 1%, and for how long now?
Councillor Stetsky through the mayor. So when the previous or our current bylaw was adopted, we gradually phased in using the assist factor. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I believe it was around 35% was the first year. Second year we went down to about 15%. Then the third year and beyond is 1%. And that was to go from that drastic percent increase from $2,000 to $12,000 per lot. Council chose to phase in, and that's the next resolution if council wants to look at something like that again or go strictly with the 1% for everything.
So we've been at 1% now for 2 to 3 years?
This would be our third year.
So Curtis, I guess this motion, is this, I guess we're asking for 1% assist factor. Is this ruling out the phase in? Or would that be the next motion I've got here is about a phase in, but so does that rule out the phase in, this motion at 1%?
Mayor Price, the intent's not with item 1, it isn't to rule out the phase in. The resolution 2 is the one to address the phase in. So the first one is, yeah, so it'd be in addition to, so with resolution 1, we're looking at setting the assist factor for the duration of the bylaw. However, resolution 2 is to discuss the phase in. If council wants to do an assist factor for the first year or two to go to increase at a slower rate.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, council? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Question in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Second motion, can I get a motion that's subject to council's consideration of engagement feedback received and that the Local Government Act, Section 568, provides a 12-month in-stream protection to developments that have a precursor application or the old development cost charge would be applicable. Council directs staff to draft the proposed development cost charge bylaw without a phased-in cost charge rate. Mover, please. Councillor Stetsky, Councillor Bassett. Discussion. Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. How many developments do we have already that would qualify for this?
Councillor Popoff through the mayor. So any development that's received a rezoning, applied for a rezoning, applied for a development permit, applied for a building permit, subdivision, in the last 2 years would receive a precursor rate for the next 12 after the bylaw is adopted. So it's really only any new development that's submitting a new application after the adoption to go through the process. So any development that council has seen to date would, in the last couple of years, would get a 12-month grace period under the old rates.
So we do have a number of those developments that we've proceeded with, so this might be incentivizing them to start sooner than later.
Yeah, good point. Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. Curtis, is this recommendation because of the feedback we received from our engagement sessions?
Councillor Peabody through the mayor, that's correct. Given that the vast majority of the respondents didn't want to increase taxes, that's why that's why I've recommended this resolution.
And I guess what is the benefits of this as opposed to the phased in approach?
The benefit I would see, it's really that percent, the sticker shock of going from 12,000 to 25,000 per lot, and that it gives a couple extra years for developers to have a lower rate that progressively increases.
So that would be the phased in approach.
Yes.
Correct. I think for me, it's a little bit hard to make a decision on this because, it makes sense for the taxpayers that, after 1 year, I guess immediately any new projects would have to pay the new DCCs, correct? But
Councillor Peabody through the mayor. So yeah, any new project that has to go through the process would have to pay the new rate. It's unlikely by the time this is adopted that it would impact any projects this year or even early next by the time they go through rezoning, development permit and building permit. But it's they're going to the new rate would impact. So because by the time a developer figures out the project they're doing and makes applications, it takes some time to get through the process anyways, is what I'm trying to say. So it's really the 12-month grace period gives an incentive to the existing developments. Any new project would fall in line with the new rate, whatever council decided, if that makes.
yeah,
I don't know if that answered your question or not.
yeah, no, I think my thought process in this is that I do like the idea of an in-stream protection, but I would almost want to have it for even projects that don't have a development permit yet or a rezoning permit, because there might be people out there that are on the verge of building a new home, but they just haven't come to the city yet, and now their costs have increased another $14,000. So I wonder if we should just have a 1 year grace period and then start the increase, and just get the notice out there that this is coming down the road as at this certain date. That way anyone who's just kind of on the verge of getting projects going have that ability to get that development started now, as opposed to waiting the 1 year where DCCs do go up higher.
Mike, do you have a comment on that?
Absolutely. So I think that perspective is certainly understood. I think what we have with this 12-month in-stream is the way the bylaw is structured, with the majority of these larger projects, especially multifamily or significant investments, the DCCs get collected at building permit stage. This current 12-month in-stream protection would still apply to the large projects that are right now potentially in the rezoning stage or even in the development permit stage. But if they have a building permit that comes after that 12-month period, they would still be eligible for these current rates. So that protection does extend for the larger projects that have already proceeded. If we were to do a 1 year, say a 1 year moratorium until the implementation of it, then some projects that are currently in stream would not seek that protection if they were 12 months and 1 day to get their building permit. And a lot of these larger projects, as we've seen, Often they do get a rezoning application or even a development permit, and then we have to renew the development permit. Often they're 1 to 2 years, even 3 years out. So eventually either scenario would potentially cut off or cause some issues with that. I would suggest that this current proposal would provide protection for the more significant and substantial investments that the city is seeing in process right now, compared to the ones that may be impacted on the individual home builder perspective.
Do you mind if I respond to that, Mayor? Yeah, I think what I'm suggesting is almost like a hybrid of the two, between like a 1 year phased in compared and the in stream. I guess it just would be a 1 year phased in, and like it does make sense to protect the bigger projects, but I'm also concerned about the single family developments where now you got a couple trying to build their first home or a couple trying to build a home, and their costs are jumping up another $14,000 on their project just because of the fees that we're implementing here.
Curtis? Yeah, Councillor Peabody through the mayor. The way the bylaw is set out, or proposed to be set out, is that single family homes aren't paying at building permit. They'd be paying at subdivision. So even if a builder came in to build a single family home, they don't have to pay DCCs. Then if we put the suite incentive on there, that would also provide them that. So they'd only have to pay DCCs if they were building a duplex or a triplex. So a single family home builder doesn't actually have to pay DCCs at building permit.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the additional details about the process. It's obviously a very technical process, and we have experts in it. So thank you very much for that additional information. I'm comfortable supporting the motion as it reads, and again, that as described for those bigger projects, it really stretches out, and it sounds like it's sort of not applicable to single family homes. So I'm comfortable supporting the motion as it stands.
Thank you. Further council? Well, question, all in favor? Opposed? Questions opposed? Motion's carried. Councillor Graham is opposed. I got a third motion. Can I get a motion that's subject to council's consideration of engagement feedback received? The council rescind resolution 320-256C, that council directs staff to include certain permissible legislated waivers or reductions in the DCC bylaw, and direct staff to not include waivers in the proposed development cost charge bylaw. Move it, please. Councillor Popoff, Councillor Ray. Discussion. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm comfortable supporting this motion, but as noted in the staff report and in the presentation that we do not need to decide on waiving DCCs today. There's actually advantages to having those kind of items in a separate DCC or a separate bylaw specific to waivers and reductions. So I just want to clarify, if we move forward with this motion and it is approved, I would still like to see a staff report come back looking more in depth on those issues. I'd like to know what happens in other communities. So I'm comfortable supporting this motion, but I would like to see a staff report come back in the future for further consideration on this as a separate bylaw, I guess.
Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So just for clarification, this would say that that every development would be treated the same, regardless of whether it's low-cost housing or seniors development or whatever.
Councillor Stetsky through the mayor, that's correct, and that's currently what's occurring today in our current bylaw as well.
I'll just throw this one out here. I'm just recognizing our housing needs in our community right now. Certainly market rates is taking care of itself. We're seeing, rental and purchase market rate housing is moving along, I think, fine. We're ahead of schedule there. I believe that where we're lacking right now is workforce housing and low-cost housing. So I'm looking at not-for-profits projects. I don't think they should be exempt, but I'm wondering if it's not council, if we see that is a priority in our community right now, these projects that would be managed by not-for-profits, would we consider a 2-year or 3-year reduction? I'm just throwing this out there to get those moving. Food for thought. Let's get a response. Curtis, Mike, what's your thought on that?
That is a great perspective. I think what we look at when it comes to the consideration of how DCCs can be used to incentivize or not incentivize some of those non-market housing, I think the city does have a lot of other tools and opportunities. What staff would recommend in these situations is a reduction in DCCs or a waiver of DCCs, and those we need to make it up somewhere else, so it gets shifted to another payer, or it results in a reduction in infrastructure investment.
Okay.
And we really want to avoid the off-ramp of supporting projects being a reduction in infrastructure. A lot of those non-profit housing properties are, can apply for tax exemptions. A lot of the areas where we want to see those are potentially in the revitalization tax exemption bylaw. And we can certainly look at other tools and resources that we have, even when it comes to financial support. The city and councils have worked on city land. There's certainly other strategic infrastructure investments we can do. There's even, from a fees and charges perspective, some communities have looked at tools as far as reduction in building permit fees or something similar to that perspective, which is a momentary reduction in sort of operating income, similar to the revitalization tax exemption bylaw. So I think there's other things that we could look at doing, but again, seeing what the market is doing. We're seeing right now 2 major projects underway for non-market housing that are starting in the community, and then there's some more that council is aware of. So I think we're at a time where, as we're seeing an upswing with that type of development, it may not be necessary to critically look at it from the DCC waiver perspective.
Thank you, Mike. That certainly makes sense. I appreciate that. Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Mayor. So just to follow up on the presentation from this morning, I wonder if you could briefly comment on, as was mentioned, the advantages of having a separate bylaw that looks at waivers or reductions and that then doesn't require the ministry approval. If you could maybe just comment on that briefly for us.
Councillor Ray, through the mayor. My recommendation would be is if council's interested potentially in waivers, reductions, or other avenues for supporting the non-for-profit rental housing or non-for-profit housing, is that we do look at it through a different bylaw process, because then we don't need to have the Ministry of Municipal Affairs approve the bylaw. We can make changes whenever we want. So we can be more quickly responsive to changes in the needs of the community and those organizations that come forward with those types of housing. My recommendation for today is that we rescind that resolution and we as staff look at bringing something back for another committee of the whole or a special council meeting to look at not just the DCCs, but like Mike's talking about, like application fees and things too, to do more of a wholesome approach on the whole topic rather than at just the DCC level. We could look at a separate bylaw just for non-for-profit organizations that are applying for housing applications.
Councillor Steskey.
Yeah, my interest, which is shared, I think, by my colleagues, is trying to make sure that there are incentives for low-cost housing. And I'm not sure to just hear you say we should rescind this motion on the table and have you come back with something else, or approve this and you'll come back with a suite of incentives potentially for low-cost housing.
So Councillor Stetsky through the mayor, apologies if I wasn't clear. So right now, council has provided a resolution at our last meeting that we include waivers and reductions in the DCC bylaw. What I would recommend after more work with urban systems and the public feedback is that we rescind that historic resolution. We pull it out of the DCC bylaw and staff, we bring in either at a future committee of the whole meeting or a special meeting that we bring forward a whole array of options to look at supporting these developments if that's what council wishes to move forward with, because then we're not tying it into just a DCC bylaw, we're looking at the whole spectrum of how we can help these developments out.
Further? Oh, call a question. All in favor? Opposed? It's good. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. That was very interesting. Certainly a lot of great discussion. I think we certainly see the need right now moving forward. You know, again, this council, this will make the next council's life a little easier, you know, that this decision was made now, and certainly for the next term, it'll make it easier with those decisions, and certainly, you know, help with budget time. I certainly see though where, you know, looking at this now, you know, the long term and looking at DCCs where we certainly need the 20-year financial plan for certainly our capital projects. It's, yeah. You probably have that information now, Mike, do you? I mean,
Mayor Price, yeah, we do have a lot of that information. You know, obviously things do change. That's why even like the 5-year window of a DCC bylaw review, a lot of things can happen. But yes, we do have a lot of that information, and that's what's been put into this bylaw, is especially with our major assets, and that's a lot of that is water and transportation and sewer. Those are really the tip of the spear with some of these things, and luckily we've done some great work. And those infrastructure funding decisions, we try to do that agile on a year-to-year basis. Rather than historically, we would do those in a 5-year master plan cycle, and now we try to make sure that those things are living and breathing, so we can be agile even in between some of these other cycles.
Yeah, I certainly think that, you know, long-term outlook, that's where it would certainly help people with a long-term outlook. You know, people look around now and say, well, this is going on today, but we don't realize that there are these things that need to be done 15 years from now if we're gonna get to where we want to be. So certainly those projections in the budget would be extremely helpful. Anyways, again, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you, council, for that. And I'll get a call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Bissett, Councillor Ray, all in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks.